Don't make me like you. That was marvelous. That was wonderful. When's that other book coming out? The other one you were talking about. Want to get a crack at that one. Our next author is very handsome and has written books about handsome people for a long time. He has written 18,000 books. He writes a book every 2 days. Stephen King is upset with him. His titles are, we all know, The Client, Pelican Brief, A Time to Kill a Pelican. Anyway, his new book is entitled Ford County, and it's my pleasure. I'm an enormous fan of his. We've had him on the show. Please welcome Jon Grisham.
Thank you, John. For those of you who have not had the experience of being a guest on The Daily Show, my advice to you is don't do it. It was the most terrifying 15 minutes of my life. I wasn't worried about getting, physically assaulted or shot, but the whole time I felt like there was a bullseye on my forehead. No, John's a very gracious host. We had a lot of fun, and he managed to get some laughs. We had a good time. So he's invited me back whenever I finish my book, so maybe we'll do it again. I want to talk a little bit about the next book. Like John, I'm not quite finished with it. I have a July 1st deadline, and I think things are pretty much on course to get there. It comes out late in October. In December of 2004, one morning I was flipping through the New York Times and I came to the obituaries, which is my favorite section of that newspaper. I always love obituaries. I love small town obituaries because they print the full name of the dead person, and you can use that name in your work without getting sued because they're dead. And so I have this thing with lawsuits. I'm always worried about getting sued. But the New York Times obituaries give you these wonderful brief biographies of people you've never heard of. And on December the 4th, 2004, the lead obituary was a picture of a man standing in a courtroom. And he looked a little bit confused. He had an ill-fitting suit on. He looked kind of amused, confused, smug, whatever. And the headline read, Ronald Williamson, age 51, freed from death row, dies. The first paragraph read something, I think I can still quote it. Ronald Keith Williamson, who left his small town in Oklahoma with dreams of major league glory, but was later sent to death row and came within why are you laughing, John? That's not fun.
The juxtaposition.
Okay. Just knock it off and let me finish, okay? Later sent to death row and came within 5 days of being executed for a crime he did not commit, died Saturday at a nursing home in Tulsa at the age of 51. The cause was cirrhosis of the liver. I spend a lot of time trying to hook you in the first paragraph, often on the first page. I know a good hook when I see one. I read the entire obituary and I went straight to the telephone and I called my publisher and my agent in New York and I said, have you read the New York Times? Have you read the obituaries? That's my next book. I had never written nonfiction before. I had never thought about it. I took off to Oklahoma to chase down this remarkable story. Ron Williamson was my age, race, socioeconomic background, pretty much the same part of the country, a small town local sports hero. And I was fascinated with how a guy like that, who at one time was adored by the town, could be devoured by the town. The research and writing of The Innocent Man took me into the world of wrongful convictions. I practiced law for 10 years in a small town in Mississippi. I had a lot of criminal cases. That's what I did in the early days. And I never had a client I thought was wrongfully convicted or abused by the system. I never thought about it. I missed the first wave of the big notorious DNA exonerations in the early, mid-1990s. I was aware, but I wasn't watching. And I never thought about wrongful convictions and innocent people going to prison. And the first thing I learned in Oklahoma, it's not just a problem in Oklahoma, it's a problem everywhere. There are thousands of innocent people in prison. And I began meeting some of those people. The book was published in October of 2006, 4 years ago. It was well received. Usually when I finish a book, I move on to the next one. I have a pretty short attention span. I'm always thinking about what to do next. And I tend to forget about them. With The Innocent Man, though, it's a story that I can't shake. And I have become very involved in the Innocence projects. I'm on the board of the Innocence Project here in New York. We started a new one at the University of Mississippi 2 years ago. I'm on that board. There are about 45 Innocence projects around the country, and what I'm doing is trying to go to all of them to have a fundraiser, to raise a few bucks. There's a direct correlation between the amount of money you can raise and the number of innocent people you can get out of prison. All of these innocence projects are underfunded. It's all private money. There's no government money. This is not supposed to happen. We're not supposed to have projects to get innocent people out of prison because they're not supposed to be there. As I go around the country, I meet a lot of the exonerees. These are men who've served, sometimes women, but mainly men, 95%. Men who've served 10, 15, 20 years for a crime they didn't commit. 35, 38 years of someone else's sentence. All their stories are fascinating. I wish I could write every one of them. They're all great, horribly tragic stories. And the stories of their lives after exoneration are equally as fascinating. But I can't write all those books. As I talk to these exonerees, I always ask them the same question. Was the real killer ever found? About half the time, the answer is yes. Half the time, the answer is no. The great tragedy of wrongful convictions is that the cases are cold. They're 20 years old. The murders are never solved. I was in a prison in Oklahoma a few years ago, sitting with a young man, Tommy Ward, who'd been there for 20 years for a murder he could not have possibly even known about. Not sure Tommy's ever going to get out. I correspond with him and try to maintain some friendship even now. It's very sad. A man, he'd been in prison for 20 years at that time, surviving in a very brutal situation, cut off from his family and his ill mother, and it's a tragedy. And I had the thought, and this is where books come from, where is the real killer right now? Tommy's serving somebody else's time for a murder somebody else committed. They got the wrong guy. What's the real guy doing right now? Where is he? Chances are he's in prison, but not always. I tell my more conservative friends, the innocence work is not a liberal or a conservative issue. When you send an innocent man to prison, chances are you've just increased the crime rate. So I had the idea of the real killer. And imagine that you are a killer, you've done your crime, and you sit back and watch with amazement as somebody else is arrested for your murder. You're sitting in your double-wide trailer, drinking a beer, smoking a joint, and you're watching TV, and there they've arrested somebody for a crime you committed. You see the prosecutors and police all lined up for the cameras, proud because they've solved the case. I love these press conferences when they announce the indictments. You know, they all line up and look smug, and the system is working. What I also love is 2 years later when the jury comes back with a not guilty verdict, you can't find these guys. They lose their attraction for the media. But pretend you're the real killer. You watch somebody else arrested. What if you go to the trial? It's happened. You're not going to get caught, not by these guys. They found somebody else. You watch the trial. You have to be amused. It has to be sort of funny, even though it's tragic. You're not worried about the fact that you kill somebody. It's amusing because you're going to get off. You watch the prosecutor in his opening statement appeal to the jury, point to the wrong defendant, call him a killer or a rapist, line up all this great proof they're going to have to put him away, and you're sitting there suppressing a smile. You watch the police testify, you watch them lie, you watch them bring in a jailhouse snitch who they put in the cell with the wrong guy, and now he testifies that he heard a confession, and in return he gets time off.